Long, long ago, a poor woman once lived in a city surrounded by a vast desert. Not a city like this one, of glass and concrete, of cars and fumes and sirens and neon glare and bright lights. No, not a city like this, but still a city of ambition and greed and hungry desires clamouring to be met. A city of wealth and poverty. A city of broken dreams and high hopes. And this young woman, she faced so much in her life. She was a widow, recently widowed, and also recently a new mother. Her husband had never even seen her son's face, and she had been left alone to care for him with very little money. But she had high hopes for him, such high hopes. And one of her greatest hopes was that he would follow in the footsteps of their forefathers and be raised in the desert in his early years by the Bedouin. The nomads who roamed those great deserts, herding their flocks as they go, finding what pasture and water they can, and pitching their tents, and carrying their sense of place in and amongst themselves. And you know, the city people, they so respected the desert people. They so admired their sense of honesty, integrity, nobility, and the way they used words. They were such poets as they sat around their fires under the stars. The other thing that the city people admired so much wasn't just the people of the desert, but the actual place. I don't know how many of you have ever been to the desert. I suspect a few. Or perhaps like me, you've been, but it's been a long time and part of you longs and yearns to return. Or perhaps you've never been, but part of you still longs and yearns to return. Perhaps we're not that different from those people in that city so long ago. And they wanted the best for their children. They wanted them to grow up in the wide open spaces where you can see from horizon to horizon and the blue sky kisses the earth. They wanted them to be immersed in deep silence that rings in your ears and pure air. And at night they wanted them to feel the cold of the desert under the cloudless sky, the Milky Way above them, a river of light where their souls and their thoughts could fly and flow freely. And this was the city mother's hope. This was her greatest hope, that a Bedouin family would foster her son. And this particular year, a clan of Bedouin known as Bani Sa'ad were riding towards the city from their territories far to the southeast. It was a hard, long, dusty, arduous journey. It took several days. And one of their member lagged behind. A woman, a desert mother. She rode a donkey. It was so thin that its ribs showed under its skin. She carried with her baby son. He wailed and cried the whole journey. He was so hungry, and she herself, this desert mother, was gaunt. You see, it had been such a dry year of drought, of jafaf. And for the Bedouin, a year of drought means a year of hunger if your flocks are not doing well, and her flocks were not doing well. But she said to her husband, I will foster a city child this year. I will. For her, she felt it was some kind of sacred duty. And her husband, well, he was courteous, he was also sensible, and he knew when to acquiesce. Of course, he said, God willing, you will. When the clan of Bani Sa'ad arrived in the city, of course, of Mecca, after several days' journey, the desert people and the city people got together. They began to size each other up. Now, you wouldn't pay to have your child fostered. That would be crude, a bit vulgar. But you might expect a powerful alliance with another family. You might expect in time to be repaid with flocks of camels or goats, or cloth, or metal, or jewels. And so the people began to look, but when they saw the poor city mother, a fatherless boy, no family alliances. They said, we won't take him. There's no benefit in it for us. And they passed over her. And when the city people looked at the desert mother, they said, she is so thin. She cannot feed her own child or herself. I will not entrust my child to her. And they backed away from her as if her bad luck might be infectious. And gradually, the people and the families made their alliances and filtered away. And the two mothers, the city mother and the desert mother, could see that they were not going to be chosen. You know that feeling. And both those proud, determined women did their best. They straightened their backs, they straightened their clothes, even if they were travel-stained or old. They raised their chins, they breathed in some sense of hope. But soon each of them could see that their only hope was each other. And so Halima, that was the name of the desert mother, she said to her husband, I will take the fatherless boy. And he, courteous and sensible, agreed to his wife's wishes. Maybe there will be blessings with him. And so Amina, the city mother, she took her child and she squeezed him one last time. And she handed him over. And when she passed over the baby, the two mothers' hands met to support the child. And I think that just for a moment they clasped each other for perhaps a little longer than they needed to. And they searched each other's eyes. And then Amina gave the child to Halima and said, his name is Muhammed, alayhi salatu wassalam. When Halima took Muhammad, peace be upon him, back to their camp in Mecca, she was astonished to find that when she went to nurse him, she had plenty of milk, not only for Muhammad, alayhi salatu wassalam, but also for her own son. And when her husband Harith went to milk their camel, who hadn't eaten for such a long time because there'd been no rain, the camel had plenty of milk, bowlfuls, and the family was satisfied and went to sleep without hunger pangs for the first time in a long, long time. The next day, the clan of Bani Sa'ad set off back to their territories. And Halima's kinsfolk laughed as they saw her donkey trotting and skipping ahead. They said, Halima, is that the same donkey you rode in on? It is, she said. Well, something amazing has happened to it. Yes, she thought to herself, something amazing has happened to it. Well, the journey back was the same as the journey in, hot, dusty, arduous, but finally the clan of Bani Sa'ad, with all their new fosterlings from the city, arrived back in their territories, and it was the most barren, desolate, desperate place you can imagine. Hardly a tree, or even a wind-swept, sun-scorched bush to soften the landscape or provide any shade. Hardly one blade of grass to soothe the eye. And the earth so scorched and dry it had cracked open, and the top layer had turned to dust and blown away in the harsh desert wind. The black goat hair tents of the Bedouins stretched out across that burnt earth, and they shimmered and moved in the intense heat. What a place. But you know, after Halima brought Muhammad, peace be upon him, back to the territories, it was as if a rahmah, a mercy, had been breathed into the earth, and the earth softened. And now when Halima's flocks went out, they always found pasture and they came back plump. And the family always had milk and oftentimes meat. And there were so many blessings to having Muhammad, peace be upon him, there. And the family had grown so fond of him that they kept him with them for much longer than the other foster children from Mecca. Until one day, when Halima and Harith were working away from the tents, their own son came running to them, shaken. And he said, something has happened to my brother from Mecca. Some men came and they laid him down and they moved something around in his chest. Halima was terrified. She ran to find Muhammad. She found him unhurt. Alhamdulillah, peace be upon him. But he was shaken as well. And for Halima, this was a sign. She knew she had to take him back to his mother in Mecca. And she did. And we can only imagine how overjoyed Amina was to get her son back. Her son, who grew from a boy into a man. The man who would be the final prophet of God. Peace be upon him. And when Rasulullah alayhi salatu wasalam spoke of this incident in the desert, he said that on that day 2 figures had come to him, 2 angels dressed all in white. And they carried with them a golden bowl full of snow. And they laid him down and they opened up his chest. And they took out his heart without spilling any blood. And they looked intently into that heart and they reached into it and they pulled out al-nuqta soda, a black clot. The black clot that we're all born with, that unworked with, untended to, turns into jealousy, hatred, anger. And the angels took it and they threw it far into the desert where it was consumed by the heat and space of that place. And then they took his heart and they washed it in snow and put it back in his chest. A child's heart, purified by heat and snow, purified by angels in a basin full of gold in the expansiveness and emptiness of the desert. A child's heart, ready to receive the greatest message of all.